Look at basically any sci-fi movie or space opera, and you always see them.
Right, the spaceborne humans.
Yeah, exactly. The asteroid miners, the orbital station people. And they're always depicted with this, this ethereal, almost graceful architecture.
Kind of tall, they're thin.
Right. They move with this deliberate, elongated beauty. It's a very romantic vision.
Oh, absolutely.
It's this persistent idea that humanity is just going to shed the heavy, restrictive chains of Earth and ascend into something sleeker, something inherently built for the stars.
Yeah, well, it is a beautiful mythology.
Yeah.
But the biological reality of a human being developing in low gravity is, it's not an elegant elongation at all.
Not even close.
No, it is a catastrophic multi-systemic collapse.
Right.
I mean, we are talking about a slow-motion car crash of human evolution.
Yeah.
We have this deeply ingrained assumption, sort of biological arrogance, really, that our bodies will simply adapt to whatever environment we drop them into.
Like we're made of infinitely malleable clay or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We treat the human form like it's just going to figure it out. And that is exactly why we are tearing that mythology down today.
Because looking at the massive stack of biophysical research, aerospace medical data, and biological modeling, you brought us, my entire perspective completely fractured.
That's a lot to take in.
It is. Because reading through all of this, the main takeaway is that we are not clay. We are machines.
Highly specific biological machines.
Right. Intricate machines explicitly engineered to operate under one very specific, entirely non-negotiable condition.
A constant, unrelenting downward force of exactly 9.8 meters per second squared.
Earth's gravity.
Earth's gravity. That downward force is the foundational premise of our anatomy. The entire blueprint of the human body assumes the presence of Earth.
And when you take away the Earth,
the blueprint becomes gibberish. The skeletal system, the cardiovascular network, the immune response, every single system operates on the assumption that gravity will pull things down.
Right.
So when you remove that constant downward acceleration, you are not initiating an upgrade to the human body. You are triggering a cascading physiological failure state.
I kept thinking of it like taking a deep sea creature, like one of those bizarre gelatinous fish that live at the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
Oh, the blobfish. Yeah, that's a perfect comparison.
Yeah, the blobfish. People drag it up to the deck of a boat and they look at it and think it looks like a monster, just this puddle of melted flesh.
Right, because it's completely out of its element.
Exactly. But down in the deep, under thousands of pounds of crushing hydrostatic pressure, it looks like a completely normal, structurally sound fish.
That crushing external pressure is the only thing that holds its physical form together.
And we are the exact same thing. We're just living at the bottom of an ocean of air pinned down by gravity. If you take us out of this gravity well, we don't adapt.
We depressurize.
We depressurize and we literally fall apart.
We do. Because the structural integrity of that deep sea fish relies entirely on the external environment pushing inward. Our structural integrity relies on the external environment pulling downward.
Pulling us into the dirt.
Right. Every bone in your body, every liter of blood, every neurological reflex you possess was forged in the crucible of Earth's specific mass.
Which brings us to, honestly, a severe miscalculation regarding our dreams of colonizing other planets.
The dosage problem.
Yeah, the dosage problem. Because for decades, aerospace medicine operated under this assumption that gravity was, well, a flexible requirement.
The thought process was always that as long as we have some gravity, we'll survive.
Right, like a fraction of Earth's pull. Like
Yeah.
the gravity on Mars or the moon would surely be enough to keep our biology functioning.
We assumed it would just make us a little weaker.
I call it the volume dial theory. You turn down the volume on a stereo from a 10 to a 4. You can still hear the song, it's just quieter.
The music doesn't stop.
Exactly, the music doesn't stop. But looking at the biophysical modeling in these sources, gravity is not a volume dial at all.
No, it is a precise medical prescription.
And if you get the dosage wrong, the patient experiences systemic failure.
That dosage problem is where the mathematical reality shatters the science fiction dream entirely. Gravity acts as a strict biological threshold.
A threshold, right, not a sliding scale.
Right. There is a baseline dosage required to maintain human homeostasis, just to keep the bones from dissolving and the fluids from pooling. And that threshold is far higher than anyone in the aerospace community wanted to believe.
Give them the number, because this is where it gets terrifying.
The required threshold is exactly 2/3 of Earth's gravity. 0.67 G.
0.67 G.
Anything below that number is a physiological failure state.
I really want to stop and look at how we even arrived at 0.67 G. Because the math behind this threshold, it basically kills the Martian dream, doesn't it?
It completely upends it, yeah.
Because when I was going through the models you brought in, I initially expected the body's response to gravity to be a straight line.
A linear degradation.
Yeah, exactly. You know, at 1 G, you're at 100% health. At 0.5 G, you're at 50% health. And at 0 G, you're at 0. A simple, predictable slope.
But it's not a slope at all.
No, it's a cliff.
It is a highly nonlinear biological response curve. The body does not degrade proportionally to the loss of gravity.
So what exactly happens at that 67% mark?
Well, the modeling looks at the activation energies required for cellular mechanisms. Specifically, how much mechanical force is required to trigger bone remodeling and fluid regulation.
Okay.
And the math shows that the cellular sensors require a minimum activation energy. If the mechanical force drops below 67% of Earth normal, those sensors don't just fire less often.
They stop firing entirely.
Completely, entirely.
Yeah.
The biological systems treat 0.66 G exactly the same way they treat 0 G.
Wow.
It is an on-off switch, and 0.67 G is the minimum force required to flip the switch to on.
That cliff edge is terrifying when you apply it to our actual solar system. I mean, let's map this out. Earth is 1 G. The absolute biological survival threshold is 0.67 G.
Right.
Now let's look at Mars. Mars is our grand ultimate destination. It's the planet we have been romanticizing as our backup home for a century. What's the gravity on Mars?
The gravity on Mars is 0.38 G.
0.38 G, which places it drastically below the threshold.
Drastically. At 0.38 G, the human body simply cannot maintain itself. The models show that at Martian gravity, the body undergoes significant irreversible muscle deterioration and myofiber alteration.
Even with gravity present.
Even with it present, because it's not enough. The proteins that construct your muscle tissues, actin, myosin, they actually begin to degrade.
Why? Why do they degrade if there's still some weight?
Because the environmental resistance is insufficient to justify their metabolic upkeep. Your body is incredibly efficient. If it doesn't strictly need a tissue to survive the immediate physical load, it strips it for parts.
It eats its own muscles.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
And the situation on the moon is even more dire.
Because the moon is 0.17 G.
Exactly. At that dosage, the body experiences a rapid, terrifying state of atrophy. The skeletal system receives so little mechanical stress that it cannot even trigger the biological sequence required to maintain basic bone density.
It is a state of perpetual starvation. If you take a human to Mars, you are putting them on a permanent, inescapable diet of 0.38 G when their biology requires 0.67 G just to keep the lights on.
That's a great way to put it. Environmental starvation.
And the counter-argument to this, I mean, the one you always hear in popular media and space documentaries is, well, they'll just work out.
Yes, the resistance training argument.
Right. The astronauts will do resistance training, they'll lift heavy weights, they'll run on treadmills with bungee cords.
Right.
But the physiological mechanics in this research completely dismantled that idea. You cannot exercise your way out of a gravity deficit.
You really can't. The reliance on exercise countermeasures is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how the body perceives mechanical loading.
Break that down for us. Why doesn't the treadmill work?
Because trying to cure space-induced physiological collapse by running on a treadmill is highly inefficient. Exercise only provides intermittent mechanical loading.
Intermittent. Okay.
Right. You might strap yourself to a resistive exercise device and simulate heavy weight for 2 hours a day. But what is happening during the other 22 hours?
You're starving again.
Exactly.
It's like trying to cure a severe chronic vitamin deficiency by eating one massive bowl of spinach on Sunday and then eating nothing but cardboard for the rest of the week.
That's exactly what it is. You can lift all the heavy objects you want, but if the baseline environmental dose of gravity is missing, your cells are fundamentally starving for a continuous signal they are not receiving.
Because on Earth, even when you're entirely stationary, like sitting in a chair, standing in a line, or even sleeping in your bed, gravity is silently and relentlessly acting upon every cell in your body.
It is continuously compressing your skeletal matrix. It is pulling your interstitial fluids downward. It is constantly engaging your postural muscles.
It is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week, ubiquitous environmental signal.
Ubiquitous, that's the key word. You simply cannot replace a continuous ambient physical force with a localized 2-hour workout session.
The cellular receptors require constant validation that they exist in a gravitational field.
Right. So you, the person listening to this right now, I want you to just stop for a second and look down at your hands. Look at your arms, your legs.
You don't feel it because you've lived with it since the moment you were conceived.
But right now, an invisible, crushing weight is bearing down on your skeleton. You are walking around under the constant pressure of a planetary mass.
And that crushing weight is the only thing keeping your bones from turning into glass.
Literally. Without it, your skeleton is actively dissolving.
Dissolving is such a terrifying word to use, but it's the exact biological mechanism at play here.
It is. And to truly understand the horror of this, we have to pivot away from the macro level. We have to move past the treadmills and the muscles and the Martian colonies and zoom into the microscopic level.
Right into the cells.
Yes. We need to look inside the very cells that build your skeletal frame. Because the physiological failure of the human body in space is not just a matter of muscles getting a bit weak.
It is a molecular horror story happening on a scale we cannot even see.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the piezo-1 antenna, because this specific mechanism absolutely blew my mind when I read the research.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. I think most people view their bones as structural scaffolding, like the steel I-beams inside a skyscraper. You build the skyscraper, the steel beams stay there, and they're essentially dead, hard, static material.
Right, but bone is not static.
No, it is alive. It is a bustling, chaotic construction site that is constantly being torn down and rebuilt every single day of your life.
That continuous remodeling process is the only reason our skeletons can repair microfractures and adapt to physical stress.
So how did that workforce actually operate?
Well, the entire skeletal system is managed by two distinct types of cells. You have the osteoclasts,
Which act as the biological demolition crew.
Exactly. Their entire job is to secrete acids and enzymes that dissolve old, damaged, or unnecessary bone tissue.
And then you have the builders.
The osteoblasts. Their job is to follow behind the demolition crew and synthesize new bone matrix. They lay down collagen and facilitate the crystallization of calcium and phosphate.
Okay, so under normal 1G conditions here on Earth, these two crews work in perfect harmony. The osteoclasts remove the old, the osteoblasts build the new. The city is constantly being renovated.
But this harmony requires a manager.
Right.
It requires a signal to tell the builders to keep working, to let them know that the building is still occupied and still needs structural support.
And that vital signal is mechanical force.
The biological term is mechanotransduction.
The mechanotransduction, which is essentially a cell's ability to physically feel a push, pull, or compression, and then translate that physical sensation into a biochemical command.
Yes. And the primary sensor for this physical feeling in your bone cells, the osteocytes, is a tiny, highly complex molecular structure called piezo-1.
The piezo-1 mechanosensitive ion channel, the way the sources described it, I pictured it as this physical molecular antenna jutting out of the membrane of every single bone cell.
That's a very accurate way to visualize it.
But this antenna is incredibly stubborn. I mean, it doesn't care about hormones, it doesn't care about what you eat, it doesn't care about vitamins.
No, it only responds to one thing.
Being physically crushed.
Right. To understand how stubborn piezo-1 is, you have to look at its architecture. It is a massive protein complex with 38 transmembrane domains.
38.
It weaves in and out of the cell's lipid bilayer, like a dense, coiled spring. So when you walk around on Earth, the 1G load physically deforms the cell membrane. It stretches the lipid bilayer.
And that physical stretching pulls on the blades of the piezo-1 protein.
Exactly. It forces the central pore to yank open. It is a purely mechanical action, like yanking open a heavy, spring-loaded door.
And when that door yanks open, what happens? Calcium floods into the cell from the outside environment.
Yes, and that calcium rush is the trigger. It sets off a massive biochemical alarm bell inside the cell, specifically activating something called the YAPTase signaling pathway.
Yeah, the YAPTase pathway. I had to read up on this part heavily because the acronyms kind of hide the actual function.
We do, yeah.
But YAP and TAZ are transcriptional co-activators. They are basically messenger proteins, right?
Exactly. When the calcium floods in through the open piezo-1 channel, it causes YAP and TAZ to unbind from their resting state in the cytoplasm.
Okay.
They then commute directly into the nucleus of the cell, bind to the DNA, and initiate the transcription of specific genes.
They deliver a message straight to the genetic code that basically says, we are under heavy structural load. The environment is crushing us. Build more bone, bring in the osteoblasts.
That's exactly the message. It is a brilliant, elegant system. The more weight you put on the bone, the more the piezo-1 doors open.
The more calcium rushes in.
The more YAP and TAZ travel to the nucleus, and the more bone the osteoblasts build. It is perfect.
Earth.
For Earth, exactly.
Now transport that entire microscopic, spring-loaded mechanism to a colony on Mars or an asteroid mining facility.
The ambient gravitational pull drops to 0.3 G or 0.1 G.
The continuous crushing downward force of Earth's mass is just gone.
Right, so the cellular membrane is no longer experiencing the physical tension required to stretch the lipid bilayer.
The door stays shut.
The spring-loaded door remains permanently locked.
Yeah.
The piezo-1 antenna go completely silent.
Wow.
Because the membrane isn't stretching, the central pore never opens. No calcium rushes into the cell. Because there is no calcium flood, the YAP and TAZ messenger proteins never detach from the cytoplasm.
They never commute to the nucleus.
The genetic transcription is never initiated, and the message to build bone is simply never sent.
So the builders, the osteoblasts, they just vanish. They don't receive the work order, so they pack up their tools, leave the construction site, and undergo apoptosis.
Programmed cell death. They stop working entirely.
But here is the truly horrifying part of this uncoupling process. The demolition crew, the osteoclasts.
Right, they don't need the piezo-1 signal to do their jobs.
They operate on a completely different pathway.
They do. They just keep working at their normal, ruthless pace. They keep pouring acid on the bone, tearing it down day after day, week after week.
It's the biological equivalent of an abandoned city undergoing active demolition. The wrecking balls are swinging, tearing down the skyscrapers, turning the architecture into rubble, but the construction crews have all vanished.
No new structures are ever erected to replace the dissolved ones.
And the body doesn't just passively stop building bone, does it?
No. It fundamentally forgets that it is supposed to possess a robust skeletal matrix. The cells lose their architectural blueprint because the environment is no longer providing the necessary mechanical tension to read that blueprint.
The cellular machinery is entirely broken.
Entirely.
Imagine you're sitting in a sleek, futuristic spacecraft. You're looking out a viewport at the magnificent void of the cosmos, and deep inside your body, your skeleton is actively dissolving.
And your body has to do something with all that dissolved material.
Right. The osteoclasts are dumping the calcium from your crumbling bones directly into your bloodstream. Your kidneys filter out that massive excess of calcium, and you then literally urinate it away.
Yes. You are flushing your own skeleton out of an airlock because your cellular antennae think you don't need it anymore.
That is horrifying.
And it gets worse. Because there is no 1G load to crush those piezo-1 antennae, there is also no gravitational force to pull your bodily fluids downward.
Which introduces the next catastrophic systemic failure.
Right. Your skeleton is dissolving, yes, but your fluids are violently migrating.
Migrating. Because the human body's fluid management system is entirely predicated on fighting Earth's gravity.
The fluid ghost.
The fluid ghost. That is the phrase I wrote down in my notes when I was reading through the cardiovascular data in the sources.
It's a very apt description.
We have to remember that human beings are basically just walking, pressurized bags of water. On Earth, gravity is constantly pulling all of that water, our blood, our lymph, our interstitial fluids down toward our feet.
And our entire circulatory system evolved over millions of years to fight that specific downward pull.
It's a high-pressure pumping system designed to shoot a dense fluid straight up into our brains against the constant resistance of a 1G environment.
The physics of this are governed by hydrostatic pressure. If we look at the variables involved in determining the pressure of a fluid column, like the human body, you have to account for the density of the fluid, the height of the column, and the local acceleration due to gravity.
So on Earth, your heart has to generate an immense amount of ambient pressure just to overcome the force of gravity pulling that fluid column down.
Yes. Your vascular tone, the strength of your cardiac muscle, the valves in your leg veins, they are all perfectly calibrated to push against a gravity variable of exactly 1.
I kept trying to visualize this, and I ended up thinking about a municipal water tower.
Oh, like a water tower built for a town on Earth.
Exactly. The pump at the bottom of the tower is massive, and it is perfectly calibrated to shove thousands of gallons of water all the way up a vertical pipe into the tank at the top. The pump has to work incredibly hard because gravity is constantly trying to pull all that water back down to the ground.
Okay.
Now, take that exact same water tower with that exact same massive pump and teleport it into orbit or onto Mars. The pump doesn't know it's in space. It has no mechanism to sense the lack of gravity.
It just keeps pumping.
It keeps pumping with the exact same furious high-pressure energy. What happens? The resistance is gone, so the water violently rushes up into the attic, overflows the tank, and bursts the pipes.
That is exactly what happens to the human cardiovascular system.
This is terrifying.
It is.
Oh.
The moment you enter microgravity, or even the significantly lowered gravity of Mars, the gravity variable in that hydrostatic pressure dynamic shrinks to near zero.
Suddenly, the immense downward resistance that your heart is used to fighting is completely gone.
But your heart is still pumping as if it's on Earth.
And the immediate physiological result is what?
A massive cephalad fluid shift.
Cephalad meaning toward the head.
Right. Up to 2 liters of blood and interstitial fluid migrate instantly from your legs and lower torso upwards, flooding into your chest and your skull.
2 liters of fluid. Just think about that volume for a second. Imagine 2 large soda bottles full of liquid just abruptly relocating from your lower body into your chest cavity and your skull.
It's a massive displacement.
In the early days of spaceflight, the aerospace medical community called this phenomenon puffy head bird legs.
They did, yeah. Because the astronauts' faces would swell up like red balloons from all the fluid, and the legs would shrink down to thin sticks because the water had vacated the tissue.
It sounds like a quirky, almost comical side effect of floating around in space.
Right, but looking at the modern test data, it's not a joke.
No, it is a terrifying biological crisis.
It is a profound crisis because the human skull is a closed, rigid box. It is made of fused bone. It does not expand to accommodate extra volume.
It can't.
No. So when you force an extra 2 liters of fluid to continuously pool in the upper body, forcing a significant portion of that into the cranial vault, the intracranial pressure spikes dramatically.
And this continuous elevated pressure leads to a condition that the aerospace medical community is only now beginning to fully comprehend.
Spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, or SANS.
SANS is where this entire analysis stops being a physics problem and turns into a visceral body horror movie.
Truly.
Your brain is literally swimming in too much fluid. The cerebrospinal fluid is backing up, and because the skull won't give, the brain is pushed physically upward.
The actual tissue of the brain shifts and presses against the top of the cranial vault.
But all of that intense, trapped fluid pressure has to go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
It follows the path of least resistance.
And the path of least resistance in the human skull is the orbit, the eye socket.
Oh man, this part.
The anatomy here is crucial. The optic nerve connects the brain directly to the back of the eye. This nerve is surrounded by a sheath, and that sheath is filled with cerebrospinal fluid, which directly communicates with the fluid bathing the brain.
So as the intracranial pressure rises in space, that excess cerebrospinal fluid is forced violently down the optic nerve sheath.
Yes. The sheath begins to dilate, expanding like a water balloon being filled to its breaking point.
The pressure builds up right behind the eyeball. The optic nerve sheath balloons out, and it begins to physically squish the eye from behind.
It flattens the posterior globe. The back of the astronaut's eyeball is being mechanically crushed flat by the hydrostatic pressure of their own brain fluid.
The back of your eyeball is flattening out. When I read that, I had to physically put down the notes and walk away for a minute.
It's a very visceral image.
The human eye is supposed to be a perfect sphere, and the fluid is squishing it into a disc.
And this relentless mechanical deformation causes severe clinical pathologies. It causes optic disc edema, which is the physical swelling of the optic nerve head where it connects to the retina.
It actually damages the nerve.
Yes. And it causes choroidal folds, which are actual structural wrinkles in the retina and the vascular layer of the eye.
Wrinkles in the retina.
Right. Because the physical shape of the eye is being altered, squished from a sphere into an oblate shape. The focal point of light entering the eye changes.
This causes hyperopic shifts.
Yeah.
The astronaut becomes increasingly farsighted.
And if left in this environment, as the pressure continues to damage the optic nerve, the individual will slowly begin to go blind.
I try to imagine what this actually feels like. Imagine the feeling of hanging upside down from the monkey bars when you were a kid.
We all know that feeling.
You know that relentless, throbbing, hot pressure in your face? The feeling of blood pooling behind your eyes, making them feel like they're gonna bulge out of your head? Now imagine experiencing the exact same throbbing, bursting pressure for months, years. Or if we're talking about a belter born in a space habitat, an entire lifetime.
It never stops.
Your own biological plumbing is trying to pop your eyes out of your skull from the inside.
And the terror of the cephalid fluid shift does not end with vision loss and deformed eyeballs.
There's more.
Oh, yes. Because the fluid shift is persistent, remember, the gravity variable never returns to normal. It disrupts one of the brain's most critical, yet historically overlooked, maintenance functions.
The glymphatic system.
The glymphatic system.
The brain's waste clearance network. This was a completely new concept to me. I knew the body had a lymphatic system to clear waste, but I didn't realize the brain had its own dedicated plumbing network for taking out the microscopic trash.
It does. The brain is an incredibly metabolically active organ. The neurons are constantly firing, consuming vast amounts of energy. And just like an engine burning fuel, this high metabolic activity produces a massive amount of toxic metabolic byproducts.
Exhaust fumes, essentially.
Exactly. One of the primary waste products generated by neural activity is amyloid beta protein. The brain must constantly clear these toxic proteins away, or they will aggregate into plaques.
And on Earth, the glymphatic system manages this.
Yes. During deep, slow-wave sleep, the glial cells in the brain actually shrink slightly, opening up microscopic channels. The system then uses the physical pulsation of the arteries, combined with the assistance of gravity, to physically wash cerebrospinal fluid through the brain tissue.
It sweeps the amyloid beta and other toxins out of the brain, down into the lymphatic system in the neck, to be cleared away by the liver.
It relies on gravity to drain the sink.
The brain washes itself, and gravity pulls the dirty water down the drain. But in space, there is no down.
So the sink clogs.
Wow.
The brain's plumbing completely backs up, because the fluid is constantly shifting cephalid, pushing upward into the head without any gravitational gradient to pull it back down. The glymphatic clearance is severely impaired.
So all of those toxic metabolic wastes, the exact same amyloid beta proteins that are heavily implicated in the development of severe neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, they don't drain.
No. They just pool there inside the cranial vault.
The brain is forced to swim continuously in a stagnant, toxic bath of its own metabolic exhaust.
And the data you saw from the recent MRI scans of astronauts who have spent long durations on the International Space Station is chilling.
It really is. The scans show an actual increase in free water at the base of the cerebrum. You can literally see the fluid pooling.
You can see the physical crowding of the brain tissue at the top of the skull, compressing the grooves of the brain.
The white matter tracts, the communication cables of the brain, might look structurally intact initially, but exposing them to this toxic, pressurized fluid environment for years poses an unprecedented risk.
We are talking about severe cognitive decline, chronic neuroinflammation, and profound behavioral changes.
The astronauts' brains are slowly drowning and poisoning themselves at the same time.
So if we review the biophysical scorecard based on the research so far,
Let's do it.
Your bones are dissolving because your piezo 1 antennae are silent and the osteoclasts are running rampant.
Right.
Your cardiovascular system is malfunctioning, forcefully pumping 2 liters of fluid into your upper body.
Yep.
Your brain is suffocating in a pressurized toxic puddle of its own uncleared waste. And the back of your eyes are being crushed flat by the resulting intracranial pressure.
And we must remember, this is happening to fully grown, extremely healthy, rigorously trained adult astronauts whose bodies were entirely built and perfectly calibrated by 1G Earth gravity before they ever launched.
Which brings us to the most disturbing question in this entire stack of research.
If a fully formed, highly conditioned adult body completely collapses and floods its own brain the moment it enters a low-G environment, what happens when we try to create a new human life in that environment?
What happens to a fetus developing in the belt or on a Martian colony?
This is the stunting paradox. And this is where the whole romantic sci-fi idea of the off-world generation completely shatters against the rocks of developmental biology.
Completely shatters.
Because in fiction, the children born in the asteroid belt or in orbital habitats are always depicted as these tall, willowy, graceful beings. The logic seems to be that without gravity holding them down, they'll simply stretch out.
But the physics of mammalian embryonic development tell a story that is profoundly darker.
Mammalian embryonic development is a symphony of gravitational cues. That is how the research described it.
A symphony, yes. While the very early stages of cell division, like a fertilized egg splitting into a blastocyst, might proceed somewhat normally in microgravity, the later stages of gestation, and especially postnatal growth, are exquisitely sensitive to mechanical loading.
The fetus exists in what biologists call a delicate gravity window.
I really want to address the amniotic fluid misconception here, because it is the most common counter-argument you hear.
People assume that because a fetus is floating in amniotic fluid inside the womb, it's essentially already experiencing zero gravity.
Right. They think the womb is a sensory deprivation tank where gravity doesn't matter.
I assumed the exact same thing. You see an ultrasound of a baby floating in fluid, and you figure, well, it's already weightless, so what difference does it make if the mother is on Earth or on Mars?
The difference is buoyancy physics versus mass. The amniotic fluid provides buoyancy, which buffers the fetus against sudden impacts, but it does not magically negate gravity.
The mass is still there.
By the third trimester of pregnancy, the fetus has grown so large and dense that its apparent weight, the actual downward force it exerts against the structures of the mother's body, is still 60 to 80% of its actual physical weight.
And that physical weight isn't just some cumbersome side effect of being on Earth.
No, it is a vital, mandatory developmental mechanism.
It acts as the training weights for a developing baby.
Precisely. During that crucial third trimester, the fetus is actively pushing and kicking against the uterine wall, experiencing constant mechanical strain.
And that physical strain is strictly required to develop the foundational postural muscles, specifically the spinal extensors.
These are the deep muscles running along the back that allow a human being to hold its head up and keep its spine erect against gravity.
Without that 60 to 80% weight loading provided by Earth's mass pulling down on the fetus, the body simply doesn't develop the musculature required to hold a human skeleton upright.
So a child born in the 0G of a station or the 0.1G in the belt wouldn't just be a little weak.
They wouldn't even possess the foundational biological hardware to sit up. They would be essentially limp.
And the situation gets exponentially worse when you look at how bones develop.
Yeah.
We just spent 20 minutes discussing how adult bones dissolve without the piezo-1 antenna activating.
Right.
But how does a child's bone even grow in the first place without that mechanical signal?
It doesn't. Or rather, the growth process catastrophically arrests.
Postnatal bone growth in children occurs at the epiphyseal plates.
Commonly known as the growth plates.
Exactly. These are areas of active cartilage proliferation located at the ends of long bones, like the femur and the humerus. In a healthy child on Earth, chondrocytes cartilage cells rapidly multiply in these plates.
As gravity pulls down on the child, creating continuous mechanical strain, the body is signaled to calcify that cartilage, turning it into hard bone, pushing the ends of the bone apart, and increasing the child's height.
So the sci-fi myth is based on the idea that without gravity pulling them down and compressing those plates, the plates just stretch out freely.
Right. The idea is they just keep growing forever because there is no resistance.
That is the core of the tall belter myth. And it is likely derived from a misunderstanding of a temporary adult phenomenon. Adult astronauts on the space station temporarily gain a couple of inches in height because their spinal discs decompress without gravity squishing them.
But a developing child's skeletal growth is entirely different.
Entirely. Without mechanical unloading, without the constant strain of gravity pushing on those epiphyseal plates, the growth plates do not stretch forever.
The body senses the severe lack of mechanical demand.
The biological logic dictates. If there is no weight to support, there is no need to expend massive amounts of metabolic energy building long, thick bones to support it.
The body shuts down the construction project early.
Yes. The growth plates undergo a process called early onset secondary ossification. They calcify and fuse prematurely. The body fundamentally arrests its own growth.
So a generation of humans born in the belt or on Mars wouldn't be tall, elongated, graceful giants.
They would be catastrophically stunted. Their limbs would be abnormally short, their bones would be incredibly brittle, and their entire skeletal architecture would be structurally compromised.
Stunted, fragile, stunted figures who literally cannot hold their own heads up. And that is just the structural frame. Let's talk about the neurological wiring.
The brain.
The brain itself requires gravity to know how to build its own software. We have to look at the vestibular system.
The vestibular system is the absolute compass of the brain. It is located deep inside the inner ear, specifically within structures called the utricle and the saccule.
And it relies on microscopic biological rocks to function.
Right. These are tiny calcium carbonate crystals called otoconia. They sit on top of a gelatinous membrane. On Earth, gravity constantly pulls down on these otoconia crystals.
As you move your head, the crystals shift, bending tiny microscopic hair cells embedded in the membrane beneath them.
It is a literal biological accelerometer inside your skull.
That is so cool.
It is. When those hair cells bend, They send precise electrical signals down the vestibular nerve into the brainstem. These signals tell your brain which way is down, how fast you're moving, and how to balance your entire body.
It's the sensory foundation for all movement.
And the system is entirely organized and wired during fetal development and early childhood.
So what happens when a fetus develops the utricle and saccule in microgravity? The otochronia crystals are there, but there is no gravity to pull them down.
The animal models and the biophysical data you provided give us the answer. When you look at rat pups raised in simulated microgravity environments, they show severe, altered cellular organization in the brainstem's vestibular nuclei.
The neural pathways simply don't form correctly.
The brain is frantically waiting for a continuous directional signal to calibrate its internal compass, but that signal never arrives. The synapses don't prune correctly. The network wires itself in the dark.
So a child born off-world is facing a high probability of severe, irreversible neurological damage. They have stunted and brittle bones, atrophied spinal muscles that can't support their frame, and a completely scrambled inner ear.
They would not possess a functional sense of balance.
Even if you tried to rescue them, even if you brought that child down Earth or put them inside a spinning centrifuge on a station, their brain never developed the fundamental software required to understand up from down.
They could never learn to walk in a 1G environment because the critical developmental window for wiring that accelerometer has slammed shut.
And the neurological damage likely extends far beyond balance, doesn't it?
Sadly, yes. The research indicates that simulated microgravity actively impairs the formation of N-cadherin. N-cadherin is a specific protein crucial for cellular adhesion and sorting in the developing nervous system.
Right. When the embryo is forming, neural crest cells must migrate to very specific locations to form the brain and spinal cord.
Without gravity to help organize this migration, the disruption in N-cadherin expression can lead to severe neural tube defects. The neural tube, the precursor to the entire central nervous system, may fail to close properly.
We're looking at massive rates of spina bifida and anencephaly in space-borne populations.
We are forced to confront a very grim, very dark reality here. If we attempt to reproduce off-world without 1G, we would not be creating an advanced extraterrestrial offshoot of human evolution.
We wouldn't be birthing the next step of Homo sapiens.
No, we would just be creating profoundly broken, malfunctioning versions of Earth life. Human biology is a strictly terrestrial phenomenon.
You cannot separate the biological organism from the specific gravity well that forged it over 4 billion years.
Which brings us to the ultimate, inescapable conclusion of this entire analysis into the human biophysics of space colonization.
We look up at the stars, we build these massive, glorious rockets, we meticulously map the surface of Mars, and we tell ourselves a story. We tell ourselves that it is our manifest destiny to go out there.
But when you aggregate all of these catastrophic systemic failures, from the crumbling bones to the drowning brain to the stunted womb, it leads to a chilling final verdict about our actual place in the universe.
The stars simply aren't for us, not as we currently exist. The universe is profoundly hostile to terrestrial biology, and the absence of gravity is a barrier that engineering alone, like better rockets, better life support, better radiation shielding, cannot solve.
It presents humanity with a grim ultimatum. If we actually want to leave this planet and colonize the solar system, we only have two options left on the table, and neither of them look anything like the glorious, liberating space operas we grew up reading.
Option 1. We spend our entire off-world lives spinning.
Artificial gravity via centrifugation. We build massive, rotating space stations or tethered habitats spinning constantly to simulate 1G through centripetal acceleration.
So we don't get to float elegantly by a viewport looking at the nebula. We have to live permanently on the inside of a rapidly spinning drum.
And even that is fraught with severe physiological challenges. Living in a small centrifuge subjects the body to extreme Coriolis forces. Every time you turn your head, the fluid in your inner ear moves at a different rotational velocity than the room around you.
It induces chronic motion sickness and severe vestibular mismatch.
We would be living like lab rats, running endlessly on a wheel just to trick our mechanoreceptors into thinking we haven't left home.
And if we want to live on an asteroid, or if we actually land on Mars, we can't spin an entire planet to increase its mass to 0.67 g. The centrifuge only works in an orbital void.
Which leaves us with option 2.
Option 2 is pharmaceutical and genetic intervention on a scale that borders on the monstrous. It is what some futurists and extreme biophysicists have colloquially termed the juice.
The juice. When I first saw that term in the speculative literature, I laughed. It sounds like a sports drink.
But define the juice biologically based on what we've discussed today. Because it's not a vitamin gummy you take with breakfast.
The juice would have to be a massive, continuous, lifelong pharmacological cocktail designed to aggressively override our own intrinsic biological programming.
To survive on Mars or in the belt without that 1G downward force, we would need synthetic drugs that artificially pry open the POSO1 channels in our osteocytes.
We would have to force them open chemically, flooding the cells with calcium, even when there is no mechanical stretching occurring.
We'd need highly complex synthetic compounds to forcefully upregulate the YAPTZ pathways, commanding the genes to transcribe bone material in a void.
We would be artificially forcing the cellular builders to keep working on a building they genuinely believe is already finished. We are blinding the cell to its own environment.
And that's just to keep the skeleton from dissolving.
Right. We would need simultaneous, continuous intervention to manage the violent fluid shifts. We're talking about aggressive, daily diuretics to artificially reduce total blood volume.
We would need localized invasive pressure manipulation implants inside the skull to drain cerebrospinal fluid continuously, just to keep the brain from drowning in amyloid beta and the optic nerve from expanding and flattening the eyes.
We would likely need to utilize CRISPR or other gene editing tools to permanently alter the endothelioglycocalyx, the microscopic lining of our blood vessels, to prevent the severe vascular stiffness that microgravity induces.
It is a chemical straitjacket. You are chemically and genetically tricking every single cell in your body every second of every day into believing it is still on Earth.
You are brute forcing an override on 4 billion years of evolutionary software, hacking your own biology just to keep your skeleton from turning into glass and your eyes from going completely blind.
And that raises the most profound question of all, the philosophical boundary of our biological ambition.
If we undertake this level of radical intervention, if we are permanently altering our DNA to bypass neural tube defects in 0G,
if we are replacing our bone marrow with genetically modified stem cells that don't require mechanical loading to function,
if we are pumping ourselves full of continuous synthetic chemicals to stop our brains from swelling and our eyes from flattening, are we still human?
that is the thought I want to leave you with today. Look at the biophysical reality we explored and think about the sheer invisible weight pressing down on you right now.
It is the tether that connects you to this planet.
It dictates the exact shape of your heart, the density of your bones, the pressure of your blood, the complex wiring of your brain. If surviving the cosmos requires us to systematically dismantle and chemically overwrite every single terrestrial adaptation we possess, at what point do the beings living out there cease to be human at all?
It's a terrifying question.
If Earth and the crushing, relentless, beautiful gravity of Earth is the very thing that forged our humanity, leaving it might mean leaving our humanity behind entirely.